I really am proud to be here on the 4th anniversary of Creative Mornings. Especially proud because one of my best friends was the founding member of this group. Her name's Rita Troyer. She lives out in San Francisco now, and she worked really hard to get this thing started. And I remember how excited she was when it was in its formative days. And now she's incredibly proud from a distance to see 400 or 300 people in one spot continuing the tradition. So let's hear it for Rita. I think that's Ryan. If next month we could give anybody some love, let's give Rita some love because she certainly deserves it. So I'll introduce myself, and then I'll talk to you about what I'm going to talk to you about. The theme is restart, and I want to talk about restarting vulnerability, but my name's Max Yoder. You should know who I am before I start telling you what I think. I work at a company called Lessonly. I helped start it 6.5 years ago. It has been an absolute joy to do so, and I actually started out of the Speakeasy. I started a business before Lessonly called Quipple, which also started out of the Speakeasy. They had two very different trajectories. One of them lasted for about 1 year and 9 months, and then I had to shut it down because I didn't do a very good job. Lessonly started 6.5 years ago, and we now have 100 teammates. We have 650 companies, and we just passed 2 million unique learners who went through our training software, so we're really, really proud of that. It's been a long time since it was a one-person operation out of that back room. Having 99 people who have your back every day and work collaboratively is a very big deal and a very exciting thing, and I am proud every day to work with all the people that I get to work with. We help companies do better work. And that the first way we get to help companies do better work is really with training software, right? We get to help them make sure that their frontline teams understand what matters, why it matters, and how to do it. But after that, we get to help them just think more holistically about better work. What is better work? Well, we think about it as something like camaraderie and clarity. We think those are two foundational ingredients to better work. Camaraderie, you'll see that on a team when people start treating one another as well as they would treat themselves. If they give themselves the benefit of the doubt, they give their teammate the benefit of the doubt. If they give themselves grace, they give their teammates grace. That's how camaraderie starts. And it ultimately manifests itself as mutual trust and respect on a team. Once you have camaraderie, there's nothing more important than clarity. Clarity is, what are we after? And how do we plan to get there? You don't have to be right about your plan for getting there. You can adjust your plan as you go. But people need to know what they're after and how we plan to get there. When a team has clarity, they know what matters, they know why it matters, and they know who is doing what along the way to help get there. Camaraderie and clarity are foundational elements of doing better work. And you can't have either of those things without the topic that I'm about to speak on today, which is vulnerability. Vulnerability sets the foundation for people to relate to one another, for people to share with one another, for people to ask a lot of questions, because we do not get clarity without asking a heck of a lot of questions. So today I'm going to talk about vulnerability, and I'd like to start with a story about a young man named Poe. 5 months ago, I was invited to speak to 13 college students on a Friday night. I thought that was a very interesting time for college students to want to speak about starting businesses. It was 6 p.m. on a Friday night, and it was completely elective. And I showed up to that room, and we had people who were just going into college and people who were just graduating from college, and they all wanted to know the same thing. What have you learned about starting a business? The thing that was uniquely interesting about this group, though, is that they were all refugees from Burma. So they had all fled the rule of a dictator, and now they're in the United States, and they got to do what they wanted to do. That's a very special thing to see, when people who have lived under oppression now get to do what they want to do. They were all so energized to talk about whatever it is I wanted to talk about. And I mostly hovered around vulnerability. This idea that you have to ask for help and seek support and guidance if you're going to get anything done. I told stories about the times when I'd done that well. When I'd called on my friends when I was feeling hurt or ashamed or bummed or unsure. When I'd called on my mentors for the same things, and when I hadn't. And I explained the benefits of the calls and the conversations and the negatives of not speaking up and asking for help. People seemed to get it. Of the 13 people, all but one of them seemed to get it. The one who didn't seem to get it was doing this the whole time. And that drew me to him. We spoke for an hour and a half, and this young man named Poe didn't say a word. So after we were done, when things were kind of breaking up, and they brought beer, because they're college students, and we started drinking beer. I still drink beer, and I'm 30 years old. But we started just kind of breaking up, having conversation, and I went up to Poe and said, hey, what am I missing? Didn't seem to work with you, what I was talking about. And he said, about asking for help, I get what you mean, but he doesn't need help if he's a real man. Those were his exact words. He doesn't need help if he's a real man. And I said, where did you learn that? And he said, stories. And I said, what kind of stories? He said, stories about heroes. I had a really nice and enriching discussion with Poe that day. His name wasn't actually Poe, but I liked that name, so I changed it. He had a cool name, too. I would have loved to use his name, but don't want to give the guy up. Poe was really open to debate. He was open to conversation. He was not hard-headed, but he had learned a perspective. And what I learned from him is that he had read a lot of books, watched a lot of movies, and seen a lot of people who were these lone protagonists with tremendous talent and destiny, who were bold and brave, and he wanted to be like them. Poe thought that feelings and emotions and pain and concern and doubt were things that the rescued have, not the rescuers. And Poe wanted to be a rescuer, so he went at it alone. He wanted to do this alone like he believed a real man should. You've probably felt like Poe before. If you've ever lived up to any Western ideals of dominating life, of having the answer and knowing the way, and you've tried to model your own life after those ideals of dominating life and having the answer and knowing the way, you and Poe and myself have something in common. We are all living up to a myth of the great person who, again, dominates life, has the answer, and knows the way. Under the guise of this myth, you can understand why people don't ask for a lot of help, why they don't admit their doubt, and why they don't admit their shame, and why they don't admit their worry, because doing so would make them not a great person, right? And we all want to be great people. I don't know anybody in this room who doesn't aspire to some level of greatness. But the myth holds that back. The myth says leaders know the answer. I'd like to get a new myth going today and every day forward that says leaders learn the answer. One word change. Leaders know the answer to leaders learn the answer, and we get dramatically different behaviors. If a leader is meant to learn the answer, then anything's fair game from a conversational standpoint. Any question can be asked. I'd like to think of a whole new way of modeling leadership, and I'm going to need all your help. Because if we ever want to make any progress, we need to let people know that it's okay to be nervous, it's okay to not know the answer, and it's okay to need guidance and advice. Our progress is dependent on it. We cannot both try to make progress and act like we have all the answers. There's a great Steven Pinker quote that says, you cannot believe in progress and act like you have all the answers. Those two things do not compute. We do not have all the answers. We do not know the way. We do not dominate life. We all feel pain. We all struggle. And any belief that we need to repress those things or hide those things to be great people is setting ourselves up for a lot of the struggles that we see every day. We see people struggling with mental health issues because they're pushing things in that need to come out. And those people feel shame about how they feel, but you all feel that same way too. We just don't talk about it enough. We don't get in front of an audience and say, it is okay to not know the answer, to need help and advice and guidance. We have a responsibility to do it. Because one of these days, if you don't have kids, you're going to have kids. And all those kids are going to need to hear that it's okay. So I'm going to talk to you about some practical approaches for restarting vulnerability. It's really easy. It's simple. You might think, well, I don't know how to be vulnerable, but you probably do it, and you need to keep doing it. Every one of us has the ability to bring more vulnerability to our teams and our relationships and our workplaces. You are not expected to know it all. And if you act like you know it all, we keep people from growing and blooming and blossoming in the way that we want them to. We can live rich and fulfilling lives. We have to help one another. So here's some practical ways to do it. Ask clarifying questions. Did you know the older that we get, the fewer questions we ask? Men and women alike. We stop raising our hands. There's a reason we should ask questions. It's called the curse of knowledge. Have you ever had somebody explain something to you really confidently and you're like, I don't get it? They're like, what? Did you hear what I just said? And you're like, I don't get it. The curse of knowledge is a psychological phenomenon where we forget that other people don't know what we know. So we leave out important details. We leave out background information. It turns out it's really difficult to remember what it's like not to know something once you know it. If you've ever gone to a website where people are communicating at you and you're like, what do they do? I can't read through any of this jargon. That's the curse of knowledge at work. The curse of knowledge makes you feel comfortable using terms like API and SME as though everybody has learned those things, but those terms are not well known. They are not fourth grade level words. And we leave people out when we speak that way. And you're going to leave people out because this is a cognitive bias. This is something you're absolutely blind to in your explanations, and it's something everybody else is blind to as well. So one way that we can get past the curse of knowledge and we can weaken it and also make sure everybody's on the same page, because that's what I want you to think about in a room. I don't want you to think about being the smartest person in the room. I want you to think about being the person who will make sure everybody's on the same page. That is your goal. That is what leadership looks like. Whether you are the one who's not on the same page or you worry everybody else isn't on the same page, asking clarifying questions is how we get them on the same page. So think about this. Somebody says something, and you don't know how they found what they're founding it on. Maybe they go, that's not going to work. What makes you say that? Make them explain it, for goodness sake. You deserve to know. Can you explain that again? People are going to tell you stories, and you're not going to get it, and it's okay to say, can you explain that again? Ask for examples. The way we bring clarity to our teams is we give, for example, this is what I mean when I say that. This is what it's going to look like when I say that. If you don't raise your hand, other people will not. But if you are in any way a moral leader or an authority leader, so maybe you have rank or role, or you're just a moral leader where people just want to follow you because they like you a lot and think you're really cool, ask more questions. I don't care if you get it. You probably don't get it as well as you think you do. Cool. You're a great audience, by the way. I'm getting a lot of nodding heads, but also a lot of early morning Friday looks. I appreciate both of them. I like the nodding heads a lot because it's nerve-wracking to be up here in front of 300 people. So when you do this, it makes me feel very good. And I appreciate it a lot. One of the things that we live by at Lessonly is this idea of share before you're ready. This is vulnerability in a nutshell. Sharing before you're ready means your early draft of whatever it is you're working on, get it out of the vacuum of your mind and share it with other people. Take 30 to 60 minutes on your first draft of that slide deck that you're working on, that presentation that you're working on, that document that you're working on. Put it in front of the people who are eventually going to need to use it and understand it and say, does this make sense? What am I missing? It's bravery to find out what you're missing before you go and perfect something in a vacuum. The vacuum that I'm talking about is your own mind. You only have a limited vantage point. This is why authors have editors. We all need editors. People see what we cannot see. We do not have all the answers. Sharing before you're ready is a way to make sure you do better work, and it's a very vulnerable activity. But if you don't do it, nobody else will. Admit when you're nervous or uneasy. Nervous and uneasy, these are universal feelings. If I tell you I'm uneasy, have you ever felt that way before? It's an amazing thing to use a universal feeling to get people to relate and empathize with one another. These are two great words. I'm nervous, I'm uneasy. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of these words that are universal emotions. They are legit feelings. When you admit that you're nervous or uneasy, you help people see new directions. My buddy Connor went on a rafting trip. One of the leaders of one of the two boats where they were rafting down the water was very good at rafting. He knew it all. And he told his team as much. The other leader was very scared to be the leader of the raft. He wanted to be in the other boat, and he was in charge of his boat. And as they went down the water, the leader who knew it all called out orders. He told the two other people in the boat what to do in order to get down the water. And the other leader, the leader that actually Connor was in the boat with, the one who was really uneasy, asked over and over again, what am I missing? I'm nervous about this. What do you all think? They made it down every run until the final run when it really got treacherous. And on that final run, the boat with the nervous people went first. The nerves had them all looking together collectively. They had all their eyes on different parts of the water to make sure they didn't run into something. And sure enough, that was a very good thing, because one of the spotters up front called back to the leader and said, we got a rock! And they, in the last second, dug in and missed a rock. The other boat went down with the command and control leader who knew it all. The two spotters in the front didn't say a word about the rock because they figured that person could see it. And they hit that rock. And their boat nearly deflated, and they couldn't use it for the rest of the trip. What leader do you want to be? Somebody who asks for help? You only have one set of eyes. And if you got two other people on that boat, you can triple the number of eyes you got going for you. But you have to admit when you're worried or uneasy. You cannot act like you have it all together. Because otherwise people will go, well, That's not my place. It's not my problem. That's not my thing. He must know. She must know. We can avoid icebergs, and we can also find opportunities. It's not just about the threats that we're going to miss. It's also the opportunities that we'd miss if people think we know exactly what we're doing. They're not going to communicate, and we need them to communicate. We do not hire people for warm butts and seats. We can do that with a heater. We hire them for their brains and their perspectives. And everybody has unique perspectives, and we need to share them. But first, we need to admit when we're uneasy or nervous so people can help us. Take breaks. If you are a manager, I'm speaking leadership does not mean management, okay? But I'm going to talk to managers right now. A leader is anybody. You are a leader if you inspire somebody to action. Managers have direct reports and a line item on a budget. Sometimes they're leaders, sometimes they're not. But if you're a manager, this one is incredibly important. You have to take breaks, because we all need breaks. So if you want your team to rest and recharge, if you want them to stay home when they're sick, if you want them to turn off on vacation, you have to do it first. They're taking your lead, your cues. You cannot expect them to understand, well, I'm the boss, so I got to be in here. But they don't. They're going to do what you do. They're going to do exactly what you do because they think that's right. So you need to set an example. You have to do it first if you want people to turn off on the weekends, stay home when they are sick, and go on vacation. And guess what? You do want people to do that. I promise you. This next one, apologize. Can anybody come to mind recently who doesn't ever apologize for any of their mistakes? You ever see anybody in the news? It was comical at first, but then you see that it trickles down, doesn't it? Once one person stops apologizing and they're at the highest levels of leadership, everybody else stops apologizing. Let's turn that trend around. Let's not let that trend win. You get to apologize when you make mistakes, and you should and you need to. Repeat after me. That is my fault, and I am sorry. You don't actually have to repeat after me, but that is what I need you to say. That is my fault, and I am sorry. That is vulnerability. And if you want other people on the team to do it, you have to do it first. There will always be a reason you did what you did. Reasons are easy. They are abundant. We are rational creatures. We can make reasons at every turn. Just because you had a reason doesn't mean you had a good one. Enough with reasons. Be the first person to apologize. Be the first mover in mending. A lot of brilliant things and great things come out of it, and it's amazingly vulnerable. And we need more of that. Lastly, give appreciation. You might think appreciation is not something that would require vulnerability, but if I tell you I love you, or I need you, or I appreciate you, or I'm grateful for you, that is a vulnerable action. Gratitude that is not shared is often described as a present that is wrapped and not given. If you feel gratitude for somebody, tell them. Don't just tell them what you're grateful for. Tell them why you're grateful for it. Do not make them connect the dots. If somebody does a behavior, say, I really appreciate that behavior, and here's why it meant something to me. That's how we build camaraderie, and that's a very vulnerable gesture. And once you start sharing appreciation, so will everybody else. It turns out that our worlds are what our minds make them. I know that sounds very psychological and very heady, but it's true. The people who study this stuff say we live in our minds. The more we share appreciation, the more we see what's working in an organization, what's going well in a relationship. If you have a spouse, share appreciation with them. Tell them what you love about them. I don't care if you've been with them for 10 years. Remind them why you love them, why they are special. Same with a teammate. It's very motivating. It's very encouraging, and we need more of it. We get a lot of negative information every day. Let's try to balance the scales a little bit. Really neat thing about Poe. After I met Poe, I got really interested in the idea that superheroes can be kind of dangerous. There are some that really do model vulnerability. Peter Parker, Spider-Man, he does a really nice job of that. Stan Lee actually did that on purpose. Because you know what? We can relate to people who have great aptitude and ambition, but also have flaws. And that's why Spider-Man is so relatable. But broadly, heroes are still these stoic creatures who are self-sufficient. The nice thing is, it seems like they want to redo, and I'm not just guessing on that one. DC Comics recently released a miniseries called Sanctuary. It's a 6-episode miniseries about a crisis center for superheroes. They fight every day, and it's painful. And this is a place for them to go and talk about their internal pressures and their conflicts, just like we all need to. This is a beautiful thing for our children and us, but we don't need to rely on superheroes. We can do it one human interaction at a time. I'm going to take some questions now. Thank you very much.